Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to 786 Boulevard. This is the podcast where Muslims get together to discuss film, TV, and other forms of art and popular culture. And today, inshallah, we shall be diving back into fashion. We've been on a bit of a hiatus as myself, Ali, and Hasnain have been quite busy, but hopefully, this episode will be worth the wait. I am really happy and honored and lucky to have joining us today Nabil Zaidi, Muslim American, who is the co-founder of the well-known fashion label Profound Aesthetic. We'll be discussing his journey in building the brand along with his other co-founders and how he started selling t-shirts at Muslim conventions and going from that to building his business into a brand that is currently sold in stores like Nordstrom. So I'm really looking forward to discussing with him, and inshallah we shall also be examining spirituality and fashion and what role Islamic spirituality plays both in designing fashion, in the branding of the label, and also in what we wear. So it should be a fantastic episode. If you have not yet subscribed to us on all platforms, be sure to do so. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Anchor, and of course on YouTube. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. It really helps out the podcast. We will, inshallah, be having some interesting episodes coming up. We are on a short hiatus right now, so we are recording an episode today and tomorrow that will be released in Muharram. But inshallah, hopefully after that, we'll be back in full swing with your support. Welcome once again to 786 Boulevard. Nabil, Hasnain, Ali, assalamu alaikum to you all. Thanks so much for joining us. Nabil, it's really wonderful finally getting you on the podcast. I think we're trying to get you on for quite some time. And we've really been dying to explore spirituality and fashion on this show. So I really appreciate you taking from your hard time and joining us here on this podcast. So just kind of like to dive into it. I've been following your work for quite some time, all the way from your early days up to Profound. And I think what's so interesting is that when you scroll through your Facebook and go back, one thing you do on Facebook is you continuously share a lot of your old memories on Facebook. And it's so interesting seeing the journey that you've gone on from the beginning till now. And I know I saw briefly that you started, back in your college days, producing t-shirts and the like related to a specific cause. Tell us a bit about your journey into fashion and what made you want to get into it.
Yeah, sure. So we started, so first of all, it was myself and my two cousins. Their name is Faraz and Aram. We actually started the idea of having a fashion brand back in 2008. So it's been quite some years now. And a lot of things have changed in the platforms and the spaces that, we currently work in. But it's always an interesting story just to reflect back on things, how back then, social media wasn't a big thing, and a lot of the technology and resources we have today is very different from what it was back then. So oftentimes, when you reflect back, it's kind of hard to relate it to today. But just to give you a general gist of how we started the brand, it was kind of random. Faraz, Aram, and I all have similar passions and interests in life, and more specifically in art. Which is where it started. So we actually took a trip to Ummah and then Isna. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Ummah and Isna as well. So I think it was at Isna when we started to be more proactive about doing some type of, because they have like a bazaar at Ummah and Isna, right? Where they sell, a lot of people are selling like different things. So we actually started after the Ummah trip. We actually decided to do the Isna trip and sell T-shirts there after seeing, the potential, like other vendors doing similar things with graphic T-shirts with like Islamic references or some type of, spirituality reference into the graphic art, and they put it on T-shirts. So we decided to do that for ISNA to kick things off, just because the timing was aligned with ISNA there. We took the road trip to DC. We printed like about, I think like 3 or 4 designs that related in some way to some Islamic calligraphy or some kind of Islamic reference. And that's how we kind of just kicked it off. And we called it the Profound Aesthetic. Basically what meant, it's deeper meaning into the visuals, which what our graphic T-shirts represented when we first launched. And things just like, alhamdulillah, things were like really kicked off well at ISNA. Great positive feedback. And from then on, we just decided to do take it even further and explore outside of just like the whole Muslim community, and branched off to like festivals and other opportunities we can do just to have like the vendor space. And again, this is before like internet was just coming, resourceful as far as like a business goes. So it was more person to person and like, in real life situations. So that's how basically launched it. It was originally a spirituality brand with a lot of Islamic references to cater for that market, and then we just like things just started to fall under place of that. So
yeah, I mean, I think what's so interesting about that story is that I think even when you go through, let's say, Profound Aesthetics, what you guys are selling right now, you go through your Instagram, you see like elements of kind of like Islam and spirituality kind of like hidden there. I wouldn't say it's an Islamic fashion brand per se, but you have those elements there. So I think when you go back to it and you kind of think about, reflect on your story, I think it's just so interesting that it was really your religion that pushed you toward your passion and your hobby, which I think is absolutely amazing. And I think that one thing I find really interesting as well is that it shows you that through your passion, through, let's say, for example, through fashion, you can really express your inner spirituality on a wider scale. Not everyone who wears the clothing is Muslim. Not everyone necessarily even believes in God, but the fashion itself is almost telling that kind of story. And I think that's what's definitely so interesting about it. Hasnain, me and you've had fantastic conversations about fashion all the time and spirituality. I know this is a conversation that you've always wanted to dive into. What kind of relationship does spirituality have with your fashion sense?
Interesting question. Spirituality with my fashion sense. One, I don't have any fashion sense.
See, I would disagree with you, but all right, go for it.
No, it's
you're being humble.
Thank you. For me, it's more like you kind of want to dress to make a statement. At least for me, because some people might be like, well, that's not like it's a positive and negative to it. But for somebody who is in a suit and tie and goes to work, there's a reason why I'm in a suit and tie, because you have to look the part. So I think that spirituality, they always tell you, you want to show your religion through your morals and your actions. And I think the same way with the way I dress. I want to show my characteristics and my faith through the way I dress. I want to be clean. I want to, smell good, the fragrance. I want to, wear, clothes that, aren't revealing, too much. So that's, it goes hand in hand.
I think like what's so interesting is that when it comes to fashion, like, I know you speak about, there's the obvious kind of things when it comes to Islam and dress, and, modest wear and hijab and stuff like that. But I think even further away from that conversation, when you think about the idea of fashion, what fashion really is, you said it's a statement, and I think it is a statement, but also it's more of like an expression of your inner self, right? The way you dress represents, one, how you want to be perceived, and two, how you really feel deep down. And I think that, right now we live in an age where fashion is so diverse, and Nabil, I'm sure you'll know more about this topic than any of us do, but now fashion is so diverse. I think you go back 50, 100 years, or, you go back far back into time, everyone's pretty much wearing a similar kind of, collection of things. Now, you go out, especially in New York City, you guys you live in New York, and Nabil, you're in New Jersey, you see people of all different types of, colors dressed in the most craziest things in New York. And I think that's what's so interesting. Nabil, what role now, let's say, when you're designing, when you're creating, with Profound Aesthetics specifically, what role, if any, does Islam and spirituality play in that process? So let's say you're going to sit down to design something that you're going to sell, design something to put up on your site, and as part of your collection. What role does spirituality, if any, play in that creative process?
That's a good question too. I think as we started to develop into more of a contemporary clothing brand, as far as the general market, the Islamic references haven't been as strong as they used to be when we started with, like, just catering to like the Ummah Islam crowd conventions. So now it's much different than what it was before. Now, as like a brand in general, just being as like one of the co-founders of the brand, we're very mindful of the things we put out, as far as not just design wise, but as a brand. So I think that's what encompasses most of the spirituality right now. for example, you know, fashion is a very sexual industry. Being a Muslim and then practicing, you know, Islam, or being like mindful for that, we shy away from anything that represents something like, you know, having representing females in a negative way, in a sexual way.
I just want to jump in quickly about what Hasnain was saying as far as the way you dress and what it makes you feel like. I think there's actually a hadith that says to dress well, smell well, and I guess back then maybe they didn't have deodorant, but you know, wear deodorant. Because when you dress nice and you smell good, you actually feel good about yourself. So when you're speaking to others, I think that comes across in your personality and the way you speak to people in a good manner. And I think that is a very good way of, you know, I guess getting spirituality into the way you're dressed. So back to you.
No, I think so. Just before I run to you, Nabil, this is a very interesting conversation about, you know, like modesty and fashion. And I think just linking Ali's point to Nabil's point as well. You know, I tried to like skim through Islamic history and see what kind of role fashion played, because right now, you know, we're in an age where every Muslim who lives, you know, I was going to say the West, but I think all over the world, is into the latest trends in fashion, is into expressing themselves via fashion. And there's that question of, you know, can a Muslim who, let's say, is practicing, praying 5 times a day, fasting, you know, fearful of his Lord, can he go out and, you know, dive into the kind of latest trends when it comes to fashion? And I think that, you know, the Prophet taught us that there are specific occasions when you should dress up. So, for example, in Islam, Eid is a day when you dress up in your finest clothes and head to the mosque. You know, when the Prophet would meet with certain peoples, with delegations, he had specific clothes which he would wear for those occasions. Nabil, you were talking about modesty and fashion. Do like include that point if you can.
Yeah. So just going back to my point before this thing started beeping here. As far as like connecting back to our Islamic roots, modesty is a big part of it still. And it's, like you said, like it's very difficult in a fashion age where it's total opposite for a lot of cases. So we practice that as well. Because we're mostly a menswear brand, we don't face most of the challenges that come with that, as it does with like a Muslim that's trying to do women's wear. So we don't face many of those challenges, but we are mindful for that. It's important as like Muslims, you know, there's some moral guidelines that we want to follow. Modesty is one of them. Another one is how you represent the brand, like the charities you do. We recently did a charity for Yemen with Islamic Relief in UK. So just knowing that our brand has a platform in the mainstream market, and because there's not that many Muslim people in that same market or mainstream market, we want to be able to use our platform and our reach to educate people who might not be aware of, like, for example, what was going on in Yemen. And with that platform that we have, and through the means of fashion, we were able to educate people with, you know, a collaboration that we did.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead. Please, after you.
You mentioned that you're mostly a men's brand. Have you looked into doing something for women? Maybe like a sort of like a hijab sort of brand, or adding something onto it, or do you want to stick with what you're already doing?
We've been juggling around the idea. At the moment, it doesn't make too much sense for us to get to women's wear. So we're gonna stick primarily to menswear because we're pretty heavily rooted in there, and the opportunity we still have there, we haven't even, you know, reached half the potential we can with menswear. So we want to keep tackling that before, you know, expanding too far out.
I think what is so interesting is that, you know, fashion right now, I feel like there's a big trend in fashion which is very similar to kind of like the modesty that, you know, you spoke about, like modest menswear, right? There is a trend in fashion now that is very similar to the kind of clothing that Islam prefers men to wear. So, for example, I'm talking about, you know, kind of like oversized tees, loose clothing, things that are very, like, you know, long line. And I think that those are the kind of clothes that Profound tends to wear as well. And I think, you know, how do you think we can use fashion to help us with modesty? And when I say modesty, I don't mean like just from a perspective of, okay, we are Muslims, we ought to dress a certain way. I know, up till now we've been talking about what Islam tells us to do, but just generally as well, I feel like modesty is a very universal concept. I don't think you have to be Muslim to embrace modesty. You look at, for example, Kanye West kind of philosophies when it comes to what he designs, or Jerry Lorenzo as well, who I don't want to get into as well. They create clothing that's very baggy, very loose, covers certain parts of your body. And that to me is almost Islamic wear, right? So I feel like modest fashion is a very is something that supersedes just Muslims. So how can we use fashion to help us with modesty?
That's a good question too, and you provide some good examples of some designers that utilize that, like the baggy wear. Although I do want to point out that I don't think that's mostly the underlying cause isn't mostly about modest fashion there. It's mostly trend over there, and it's the same thing with us. The trend right now is like the baggy wear, but it's interesting how it ties back into modest fashion where you're wearing like looser clothing. And it also rolls over into women's wear as well, where the women's like that, the baggier look as well. I think just as like a general point, to the main point that you have about, just observing modesty in fashion. Like modesty can be represented in several ways, like you mentioned. It could be like how you represent yourself on your Instagram page or to the public. It doesn't have to be specifically to what you wear. Great thing about fashion is it's not just like the items that you're wearing, like or just clothing. There's a big part of it which is branding that involves in fashion. And branding is storytelling, it's imagery, it's like narratives, and that's like the main thing that you can utilize to really communicate to the audience that you have or to the main public. Clothing is just like a byproduct of the narrative that you tell, that you're representing. So the main thing is storytelling. So brands like Fear of God, which is, within its name, it's really like God conscious as a brand, and the products are a byproduct of what that represents. Profound is very similar in the way where our branding often talks about spirituality, religion, modesty, and just being like a good human being on earth, and our clothes are a byproduct of that. So again, I don't think like having the baggier clothes is intentionally as like the modesty wear, at least for us. And I'm pretty sure it is mostly trend based for the rest of them too. But to circle back to like the whole, when you look at fashion in general, the branding is something that's even more powerful than the product. And then you can represent your modesty and your narrative and your cause and your purpose and what you believe in, such as, the spirituality aspect of it into the narrative, whether it be like your editorials, your social media posts. And I think, for me, I look at that more when, in terms of like these types of conversation. That's something that we stand by and we try to represent through our narrative.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I'm so glad you mentioned Fear of God as well, because like I remember the first time, I'm not really like completely aware when it comes to fashion. I'm kind of like the kind of guy who just sees what I like and buys it and wears it. But the first time I ever heard of Fear of God, I was like, oh, how can they be using God's name to sell high-end clothes? I was pretty taken aback. But then the more I started to listen to Jerry Lorenzo and see his interviews, and I began to understand that the fact that it's not that he's using God's name to sell clothes, rather it's that he wanted to put his own DNA, which is his fear of God and his search of understanding of God, into his fashion, which I think is absolutely incredible. Even again, like we mentioned, Kanye West, he has spoken about how the Bible tells you to dress, and the fact that the Bible talks about how you should be wearing, I believe it's either one or two materials in your garment, and that's kind of like a vision that he holds when he designs clothes. So, how much do you think of our faith and spirituality should come out in what we wear, given that we live in a secular society. So in the society that we live in, whether we're here in the UK, in America, religion, constant religious expression is almost frowned upon. It's almost something that it might be respected, but it's something you keep to yourself a bit, kind of like you keep it to the mosque, you keep it to the church, you keep it to the synagogue. You're free to express your religion, but generally when you're out and about in New York City or wherever you are, you're generally seen as part of society first and part of your religion second. You're seen as an American first and a Muslim second, kind of thing. So given that, how much do you think our faith and spirituality should come out in what we wear? So for example, is it proper, for example, do you think for Muslims all around America to come out wearing the full robes and dressing like that, or should it be much more subtle than that?
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on like person to person, and how you perceive how you want to be represented. The reason why we started Profound is with like the whole graphic T-shirts, because graphics on your T-shirt is like the best way to represent yourself or make a statement about yourself, right? Your graphic T-shirt often tells a person what you believe in, what you feel strongly about, or something about your personality, right? And when we started doing Islamic references, that's because we wanted to represent Islam through our garments, but there was a void in the market for that, or something at least tasteful that we thought wasn't in the market for that. I mean, there's actually a lot of Christian brands that do a great job with like their references as far as like Christianity goes, and put it in a really cool way, a tasteful way into their clothing. But Islam, for us, we never really found that, so that's why we started off doing that. So I think it's really cool to represent your religion, whether it be Christianity or Islam or whatever it is, through your garments or through mostly your graphic T-shirts. I think the stuff that we do as far as like Arabic references, or even before that, like we had like Bismillah on the shirt before.
Nice.
And that was like one of our top sellers when we were doing the Islamic festivals or the markets. And the reason for that is because people want to represent that, they're of a Muslim religion, so Islamic religion. So I think graphic T-shirts is a great opportunity to do that, and I think I encourage it. I encourage people wearing like their religion in the means of fashion to represent themselves, to make a statement.
That is
to evolve their identity.
That is really interesting, because I remember, like, harkening back to my youth, I used to wear, for example, and we'll speak about this when we get into Noor later on, but I used to wear Zulfiqar around my, on a necklace. And I remember, like, one of my kind of elder brothers sat me down and said, listen, you live in a secular society. People don't like to be fronted with your religion. People don't like to see you fronting your religion to them. So it's better to keep that stuff kind of hidden. And I think now we've definitely moved to a kind of, let's say, stage in cultural society where people are encouraged to express themselves in every which way possible.
Right.
Express your truth, tell your truth, right? Yeah. And that is something you can do through your clothing. So Ali, I know you've been sitting there patiently waiting to throw out your opinions. Tell me something, Ali, as an actor, someone who often dresses up for rehearsals, and a model as well, right? You have to dress a certain way when you go to these shoots. What role does fashion play generally in your day-to-day life? I mean, is it something you think about? I know I've seen you at work. I've seen you in your 9 to 5. You're there with your formal shirt and pants. But on the weekend when it's sunny and you have to go outside, is fashion something you think about, or is it just kind of something you slap on and walk out the door?
I think when I'm dressing to go somewhere or do something, then obviously, yes, I'm going to be like you saw me at the office or whatever. But if it's just on the weekend, I'm going to go out in, T-shirts and shorts, and that's about it. But what I was going to bring up was, have you guys thought about doing something like, along with the shirts, doing some accessories? Like, for example, if Nouri would show his ring, can you show us your ring, Nouri? That one right there, right? Green. So that's been standing out to me the whole time that he's talking, every time his hand comes up.
Have you put your eye on my ring? I've got to put it away now before it gets lost.
Yeah. Take that. Have you guys thought about maybe doing some sort of Islamic accessories along with the T-shirts, or do you want to just kind of keep that separate? Because one thing I do is if I'm wearing something blue or something, then I'll wear my blue key ring. If I'm wearing something different, maybe like brown or tan or even a green T-shirt, then I'll wear my green one, like the one Nouri has. So and it stands out because people notice that, okay, you know what, you're wearing whatever you're wearing, but then that ring that stands out like that, and they ask you about it, and it gives you an opportunity to talk a little more about it and tell people why you're wearing it, what it means.
That is actually quite interesting, Nabil. Like, do you guys dive into jewelry as well? Is that something you do at Profound? And like, is it something that's easy to add in as addition to your general line, or is it like a completely different world?
So we actually did it more in the last couple of years than we're doing it now. So right now we're mostly outerwear, tops, bottoms, basically everything except for footwear right now at the moment. But in the past, when you mentioned like, something like jewelry, the trend, and I forgot what year it was, bracelets was really a big thing. So we dived heavily into bracelets. And one of the collections of bracelets that we did, which also fell into necklaces, is that we did a design that was inspired by the Dusby.
Nice.
If you ever saw that, and I'll probably pull it up somewhere, but
bracelets, right?
We did bracelets, and then we also did a necklace.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it was inspired by the Dusby, and then within our product descriptions, we talk about that, like how that inspiration came, nice. It does, what the Dusby is, this and that. So yeah, I mean, accessories is a huge market. We did it way more in the past, and again, it's like because of the trend, than we are doing it now. But we are starting to do more rings. We're
nice.
having to. It's not out yet, but that's something that we're currently working on, and that will expand on other things as well, like different types of chains. We're using more metals for the upcoming accessories lines versus back then we did like a lot of wooden things, more natural stones, and things of such. But yeah, like right now.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say right now we're pretty much tapped into every category of footwear.
I haven't seen it, so I was asking if you guys have ever done like a chain with like the Mecca, like the Kaaba actually right there with a chain. Have you guys done?
We haven't.
Do you think people would wear that?
That's $1 million idea right there. If you go ahead, you have to pay Ali royalties. Hasnain, let me ask you this, Hasnain.
I have a lot of thoughts going in my head right now. Ask me.
I know. I can see you on the edge of your seat, just waiting to say something. I'll give you one line, and I'll let you let loose as you usually kind of do. How do you think Muslims should dress in 2020?
I think they should dress, honestly, my honest opinion, however they want to dress. Because there's outlines for how we should dress, male and females.
Yeah.
And I think the word modesty has been mentioned a few times, but what is modesty to me versus modesty to you? It could mean something different, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's something I was pondering on while you guys were talking. It's like, all right, I know we should dress modest, but what does modesty mean? Because it's not gonna mean the same thing that it means to me than it means to like Ali or you or Nabil, So I think when the person, him or herself, feels that they're dressed modest, I think that's fine for somebody who's practicing. Because if a person is practicing and to them they feel that they're modest, I mean, to me that's good enough for however it is. Does that answer it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it does. I think that's very interesting. But I'm talking more about expressionism than specific to modesty. So let me rephrase the question. Muslims in America right now, we're already in a very confused. I'm talking about immigrant Muslims who came over from the East. We're already in a very kind of confused mindset because mentally we're back there, physically we're here. Our parents, live there, grew up there, but they're raising us here, and already we are attacked by all these different, elements of our life. We don't belong here, we don't belong there, we don't belong anywhere, and as a result, we're almost on the fringes of society. Given that, how do you think Muslims should dress? Do you think that we should just kind of like embrace, the fashion trends of non-Muslim Americans, or do you think that we should kind of like build our own identity in what we wear?
I think there should be some place in the middle, right? Like for somebody like myself, I keep my identity, but I also want to be part of the newest trends, right? I also want to know what's going on there, and if the trend is not going against like my morals, then I'm all for it. And if it looks good, it looks good, you know. There's been times where I said that I would never wear that. That's ridiculous, you know. And like a year later, I'm
I've
wearing
been there.
you know, a year later, I'm wearing it because you know it grows on you, and you know you throw something on and you feel good, and it's not you feel good in it, and this is you because as an individual grows, you know their expression grows with it. So I mean, you know, I think it comes down to as the trends go, what you're feeling and what you're not feeling, you know.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that fashion changes as you grow older. I know for myself, like when I was growing up, I was really into designer clothes, and I would just spend so much money on like Dolce & Gabbana, Gucci, Armani, and kind of like throw those clothes on. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but like the more I grew up, the more I realized as a person, I'm more of a simplistic person than someone who kind of like indulges in luxury. So I literally got rid of all my clothes and just kind of like purchased things that I like, that were affordable but simple. I think the keyword I'm looking for is simple. And I think say that again, sorry.
I'm not everybody's as wealthy as you, man.
No, as in the irony is I was actually earning very little money, but spending that little money on those clothes, which I think is another interesting conversation to have when it comes to excessiveness. And what's interesting is that the way I dress and the way I choose to dress will not be the same as the way someone else who might be Muslim chooses to dress. And I think that's what's so interesting when it comes to expressionism. Nabil, I want to get into Nour specifically. And for those who don't know, Nour was a fashion label, a Shia specific fashion label, which kind of was there to express Shia Muslim identity. And I was actually kind of thinking about this before we started the podcast and reflecting on it. You mentioned that when you started, you kind of like got into the business of making kind of people feel proud to express their Muslim identity at Isna and and stuff like that, and making graphic tees with Bismillah in it and stuff like that. And what's so interesting about the way society is right now, and the way, especially in the Muslim community, I feel like it's very easy to express your Muslimness. It's very easy to wear a t-shirt with Quds on it or the Kaaba on it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's very easy to wear a t-shirt that says, for example, God is great or whatever. But when it comes to Shia specific identity, we've never kind of like had something, a fashion movement that teaches us to be proud, to embrace and express our Shia identity. And I think that's what I love so much about Nour. There's so many kind of like fashion labels that are doing great work when it comes to, getting people to express their Shia identity. Shia Wear, for example, is one of them. And there's a few others. There are, Hasnain, you're smiling because I want to give you a shout out. But I think, despite that, like, there are also a lot of Shia fashion labels who kind of like just, they try their best, but it doesn't really speak to me the same way that Nour spoke to me. And I think the reason that Nour spoke to me so much was because it wasn't just about taking a picture of the shrine and putting it on a t-shirt. Rather, it was about saying this is an identity. I'm not trying to sell you a jacket. I'm not trying to sell you a tee only. What I'm trying to do is give you an identity to embrace and be proud of. And I think that's what was so amazing about it. That's what kind of like almost brought a tear to my eye, thinking about, you're teaching Shia kids to be proud and express their Shia identity and embrace it in front of the world. So what encouraged you to get into that specifically? And what would you say were kind of like some of the highs, lows, and lessons learned over that period?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. I really enjoy the fact that you enjoyed the brand. That's something, it was like a personal project for me. And then also I wanted to say that you hit the nail on the head as far as everything you said about what Nour was intended to represent. It was for the Shia community to have something for their identity and be proud with it. Because like you mentioned, there wasn't there's a lot of cool like Islamic brands out there, like 5 Pillars, for example.
Yeah.
I don't know with them, but they do like cool Islamic references and stuff. But there wasn't really anything that's tastefully done for me, at least for the Shia community. So what started Nour, this was about, I say 3 years ago. It's been 3 years. Right before Muharram started. I was at Masjid Ali in New Jersey, and actually somebody was selling T-shirts there, as they usually do. It was like, whether I forgot whether it was fundraising or what it was, but someone was selling T-shirts there. And one of the community here knows generally what I do and what Profound is and what we do as a company and like the whole branding part of it. So somebody approached me or like, hey, why don't you provide us with some designs? That's something we can wear. So initially it was just a design just for literally like the New Jersey community, right? That's how it started off. So it wasn't planned to be like this whole global thing or bigger than what it actually ended up being. So it started up being like, somebody approached me. They wanted something cool to represent the Shia community here locally. And I was like, all right, cool. When I have time, I'll try to cook something up, right? And so I literally created the brand, the website, the branding of it, and a quick design, which was the Zulfikar one, in one weekend when I had some time right before Muharram, and I just put it out there. And, alhamdulillah, with like the things I've learned while doing Profound, I guess I was able to escalate things faster because of the knowledge I had and experience I've had, which allowed it to, become what it was quicker. And, and that's like logistically or just like branding wise, marketing wise. And it ended up being like the reach ended up being further than what it tended to be, which was the local Masjid.
It became, I remember it became a whole movement. Like everyone was involved in that.
So, the Instagram is Nour.786, where you can see the, like you were mentioning how you were describing it. It was more about the branding of it, the identity of it, than the actual clothing, where it was something that the Shia community can be proud to represent. Something like, this is a brand that I am proud to wear that represents me as a Shia Muslim. That was the beauty of the whole brand. And at least that's what I enjoyed the most. And we did some cool things. Like, we did the interview with you. It also became like a platform where Shia creatives can connect. You can discover other Shia creatives. Because like you said, we didn't have much of a Shia community in an artistic way. And just to point out the fact that also one of the reasons why I started the project and the way it was like, suggested to me was like, outside of like Shia communities, that people that are unfamiliar with, who Shias are or what they represent or what they believe in, a lot of them see like the public perception of Shias is very different than what it is, right? Like, let's be honest, like people see us in a very negative light. Would you agree? So
yeah, 100%. I think we all can all attest to that.
yeah. So I made a conscious effort to try my best to change that into a more positive light, and make it something that people can like be like, okay, this seems like the Shia community looks like a little different than what I thought it was. Let me dive into it further through this medium, which is fashion, which is clothing, which is branding. So that was the whole purpose of it. So what ended up happening was last year, because it originally intended to be just like a very side project thing, and not to even last past one season, like one Muharram.
And you find yourself with the beast that you couldn't control.
Right. And the thing was also like, I successfully automated a bunch of things, this and that. But, as things started to grow, I found that, and I wanted to keep going. So I talked to some people to see who can carry it on and like for myself to be completely hands off with it. And I eventually last year, so basically somebody else owns it now. And I'm not allowed to say who it is yet, but somebody else owns Nour now. Hopefully they will continue to, expand on it and make it bigger than what I've started it with. So that's the whole, that's the whole project, Nour. And again, like, when I departed from it, it was like I'll be honest, I still miss it because again, it was a personal project because of the passion I had, So but the thing was, if I were to continue it, it would have just died down. and I wouldn't be able to keep up with it. And again, it was because that I didn't intentionally plan it to be what it was.
I can imagine how bittersweet that is, especially like something, designing something yourself and your own baby, almost giving it away to someone else. I'm sure it's in capable hands now, but still, I know it can't be easy to give that stuff away. And I think, the reason I did want to speak about Arno specifically was just because it kind of exemplifies everything we want to discuss in this podcast, which is the relationship between spirituality and fashion. And all of us here being Shia Muslims, Noor kind of nailed that intersection, right? The intersection between fashion and spirituality and identity. So perhaps we can kind of conclude that the robe between spirituality and fashion is identity and expression of that identity, which I think is very important. I want to kind of end on speaking about prominent brands like Nike, who have kind of jumped on the Islamic fashion trend craze by selling, for example, sportswear, hijab, and stuff like that. And I think it's very interesting, just to kind of wind this podcast down. I think it's very interesting because when it first started, I know there was a lot of backlash. Me, like my own personal opinion, I was just like, well, they're doing it. Good for them. I didn't really have any issue with it. But I know a lot of Muslims were kind of upset that because they felt like these big multi-billion-dollar businesses were almost taking a narrative away from Muslims to tell their own kind of to build their own fashion empires. So a lot of people are saying that it should be Muslim-owned businesses that sell things like sports hijab and stuff like that. Hasnain, what's your take on that? Do you feel like only Muslims should sell Islamic-related wear, or do you like praise companies like Nike, and others who are selling sports hijab, and even Dolce & Gabbana, for example, selling abayas and stuff like that?
To me, I mean, Nike did it, so they did it. I mean, they took advantage of a market. I mean, I'm a finance guy, right? So for me,
yeah,
take advantage of a market. But I think it comes to us to support the smaller brands who are making this stuff on the side. I think, if Nike made a sports hijab because they said, hey, we need to fill this market because they're not doing it, and and as Muslims become more athletic and start start playing these sports, they need these type of clothes. So they did it first. You can't blame them for it, right?
Yeah.
Because if
that was definitely my take on it as well. I was like, well, if they're doing it, good for them.
But if a brand comes out where they started making athletic wear for Muslims, then it comes upon people like me that are going to go support them. That just comes down to the public, right? And that's, unfortunately, that's my take on it. It's just, Nike did it, they did it. If I was the CEO of Nike, I would have done it first. I'm filling a market. That's just business. So
Ali, what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's like asking if only Italians can sell pizza. Sell pizza.
But I'm guessing Italian-made pizza is the best pizza, though, right?
No, New York City dollar slice pizza.
But honestly, do you feel like I mean, I guess there is kind of the argument that Muslims kind of should have done it first, but at the same time, Nike as a business is 30 years ahead of Muslim businesses, right? So do you feel like there's an unfair advantage? As a businessman yourself, do you think there's an unfair advantage? Do you think they should bring in Muslims to kind of like run this side of things, or not? Ali.
Oh, I thought you were asking Nabil. Sorry.
No.
No, I don't think so, because it's just another product, right? And so you can't expect as a company, you can't expect to bring in that particular religion or ethnicity to just run that department. Like, it doesn't make sense. If somebody happens to be, okay, great. But there are also brands out there like Zara the brand, or Zara the label, actually it's called. And then there's also Hot Hijab, and then like a bunch of other hijab brands that are out there that can start doing it, and perhaps they're doing it. But yes, it's a disadvantage, but also it's a very positive thing, because if Nike is doing something, then people see it as a mainstream thing, that they're not seeing it as, okay, this is only a minority thing.
Yeah, I do kind of agree with that, actually. Yeah.
Right. So that puts ahead and puts Muslim women that are athletic on the map, saying, okay, it's not just non-Muslims that are athletic playing soccer or playing any sport, but Muslims do it too, and this is what they wear, so this is what we're providing. So I think it's an excellent idea, and it kind of puts us ahead of where we would be if a smaller brand started doing it and didn't have the same national or international recognition.
Nabil, you've been shaking your head in discontent. What's your opinion?
I wasn't intentionally, but no. I was just listening to everybody's opinion on it, and I was in the same time I was trying to form my opinion as well.
Yeah.
So I think that, just to backtrack a little bit, like, you know, you think about why Nike would release something like a hijab line or a piece like that, right? Obviously, like you guys mentioned, it was like mostly finance related. Like it's like a money opportunity, a market opportunity too. But then you also have to dive in, like being somebody in like not just like the fashion world, also a big business as well. You gotta see it as like a business as well. As much it is like a creative art and, you know, editorial, that is also a very, very, very big business. So it does make sense in a finance perspective too. But you also have to look into, like, take a deeper dive in, like, why did it happen, or why did it get brought up? There's probably a Muslim person there who brought up the idea, who wanted to be like, hey, we should be representing Muslims, and that person, whoever that was, whether it be a designer, whether it be like a marketing coordinator, there was probably Muslim. I don't know the backstory, but it was a Muslim person. It was like, hey, you know, I work at this company, Nike, that has a massive platform, and that hasn't been represented by Muslims the best way possible. And they take it upon themselves to, you know, channel that into that mass media. So there's probably a Muslim person who was like, hey, you know, this is something I believe in as far as like my religion, and I think that we should be representing Muslims better or more. Let's come out with this hijab for sport. So you also have to give like Muslims credit to be in these massive companies, whether it be like Nike, and Muslims that are in the background that you probably never heard of or are going to hear of, that, you know, did all this work behind the scenes to make this happen, to represent our religion and our people. So that's just something to consider, I think.
I also wanted to add to that. I think there also comes a lot of struggle, because if I recollect, I think there was a lot of issues that happened during the Olympics with women wearing hijabs and they couldn't, you know, perform at the Olympics. I'm pretty sure there was some backstory with that, and years later Nike came out with it. So I think it comes down to, like, we went through that whole phase, and then Nike was like, all right, you know, we need something for this. So again, I just wanted to bring that up.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, we should encourage, like, I know like there's Muslim businesses out there, Muslim owned businesses, and they're like, oh, why should we support Nike while these other people are doing it? Which is fine. It's a valid argument too, but you can't discredit, I don't think you can discredit like these big houses, because there's Muslims, our Muslim brothers and sisters that are working at these big houses that are making these changes too, to hit the mass media, for Muslim athletes to wear, you know, like their team sponsored by Nike. They need to wear Nike products. Here's a product that they can wear for their hijab that is like, you know, whatever the functionality is for that hijab at Nike. So yeah, just to, you know, give credit to those people, those Muslims that are kind of lobbying for us in these massive platforms and massive companies.
Nice, very valid point. Coming full circle to the beginning and just kind of like finally bringing it to a close, Nabil, you know, we didn't get to talk a lot about your grind and your hard work, but, you know, I think one really inspiring aspect of your journey, you know, I follow you on Twitter and Facebook, and, you know, every time you tweet something about grind, I'm like, you know what, he just tweeted exactly what I was thinking. And I think that, you know, it's just so evident how much effort and sacrifice you put into your work, which I think is a very important part of success and of growing any business. You know, Ali and Hasnain, both of you guys have businesses as well. I'm sure you'll agree that you need to put the hours in, and the sweat and the blood and the tears, to get something to be, you know, to build something and for it to be successful. I'm also definitely of that kind of work ethic. You know, as I've told you guys before we started, you know, right now is a very crazy time for me. I'm working literally 10 a.m. to like 10 p.m. Every day, and I'm just really glad we managed to squeeze in this conversation. But Nabil, what kind of advice would you give to any young Muslim listening who wants to get into fashion, who wants to get into you know, making their design label, who's inspired by Profound or inspired by Noor, who wants to build something themselves? what advice would you give them, firstly in regards to how they can get started, and secondly in regards to work ethic?
Yeah, sure. So I think the main advice I would give for somebody that want to get started into fashion, and being that the fashion industry has so many different roles, it's not just like creating a brand. There's so many other things that you can do in fashion in the industry. It's all about, as it is for most industries, all about relationship building. Really use your platforms to connect with people and find like bridges that you can build amongst other people that have similar interests. And I've personally seen, like, when we started, and we started in 2008, but we really started getting into like the fashion industry, like the general market, in like 2011. That's when Urban Outfitters was picking us up, Nordstrom was picking us up, and like it wasn't just like a Muslim Islamic brand anymore.
Yeah.
It was more of like a fashion house that's ran by Muslims. That's how that shifted. That started when we started back then. There wasn't that many Muslim, people in that industry. But today, mashallah, I see so many Muslim designers, Muslim creatives, Muslims everywhere being more involved in the space now. And I've seen the main medium they're using is actually social media, like Instagram, to represent themselves. So you really got to use your platforms and build connections on that platform. There's so many opportunities there. I can give like so many examples of like success stories that I've built through these relationships built on Instagram, for example. So yeah, just keep connecting with people. There's a lot of people out there that have similar interests and that can either guide you or you can just feed off of. So
wonderful. Nabil, just want to take this moment to appreciate you and all your hard work. Everything you've kind of like done. You've definitely left us all inspired. I'm sure you've left anyone who's listening and wants to, and was wondering about the connection between spirituality and fashion inspired, or who wants to get into fashion themselves. As a final question, what do you believe that Muslims have to offer the fashion world?
Oh, so much. I think that question is so open because it's so untapped right now. So it's such an open-ended question right now. And I think that the beauty that Muslims can offer the fashion industry now is just like Muslims, from what I've seen, like from all backgrounds of the Muslim communities, we are so creative people that I've seen, and we come from like diverse backgrounds to bring like different elements into like design, for example, or just creativity, an example. So I think we can bring a lot of diversity. A lot of things that fashion hasn't even seen yet. So I think diversity is the big thing.
Wonderful.
That we bring.
Nabil, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Hasnain, Ali, we'll see you guys again soon. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. All right, and that was a really interesting discussion with the ever inspirational Nabil Zaidi. He spoke about his grind, how he, along with his with the other co-founders of Profound Aesthetic, built an empire really out of a dream that began with selling graphic t-shirts at Muslim conventions. It's really inspiring to see just how far they've come. It's really inspiring to see and hear him talk about his work ethic as well. And inshallah, I hope that anyone who's listening who had the interests, who had similar interests and was interested in getting involved in fashion and expressing themselves through fashion, picked up some of the wonderful wisdom that Nabil shared with us today. We are currently on a short hiatus. We have one more episode coming, inshallah, in the next week or 2 weeks with the first of Muharram, where we'll be sitting down with Nasheed artist Ali Fadl and speaking specifically about how he has helped the recitation when it comes to the Epic of Ashura and the storytelling of the Epic of Ashura through recitation, how he has helped evolve that into what it is today. So that shall be, inshallah, a fascinating discussion. Then we'll continue to be on a bit of a hiatus, but we will be back in full swing, hopefully in September, with a plethora of really interesting guests from various different avenues of Muslim culture from all around the world. So I really hope you stick with us. And again, if you have not subscribed to us on the various platforms that we are on, please do subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Anchor, we're on YouTube, and don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. It really does help the podcast. Thank you again for joining us here on 786 Boulevard.